Tonight's event is part of a new MCA series of public programs that we're doing called In Progress, which is meant to give visitors a glimpse into the working practices of artists in all different kinds of ways. We're thrilled tonight to focus on the work of Paul Heyer, whose Chicago Works exhibition is currently on display upstairs. Heyer's exhibition, which was organized by co-curators Omar Kholeif and Aaron Toll, is his first solo museum exhibition and his most immersive to date, creating a multi-sensory, dreamlike experience for visitors. And I encourage you all to head up there after this talk if you haven't been already. How many have been already? This is your test. Yes, you win. So tonight, Paul will discuss his work and process with Omar Kholeif, my colleague, who is Manilow Senior Curator and Director of Global Initiatives here at the MCA. So help me in welcoming Paul and Omar.
So I forgot I was giving a talk today, so I didn't put on my nice shoes. And Paul looks much spiffier than I do. And also there's just want to clarify, we're not in a fight with each other, this big expanse. It's actually, we just wanted you to be able to see the projector. So putting together Paul's exhibition was a very gratifying and emotionally rich experience. I first encountered Paul Heyer's work in a gallery in Los Angeles circa 2014 without actually knowing that it was his work. Was very captured by its dreamlike qualities. And then when I moved to Chicago, a mutual friend called Kevin McGarry said, you need to meet this artist, Paul Heyer. And I hadn't actually put two and two together. And we had a drink, we got to know each other. And, you know, it's kind of weird when you know someone socially, don't necessarily do a studio visit with them. But I started to Google his work without him knowing and said, I really would actually like that studio visit if you don't mind. And when I went, my breath was taken away, particularly by these flower paintings that had these kind of vortex-like portals in them, which to me spoke to a kind of very interior darkness that just resonated with me on a phenomenological level. So first I invited Paul to be part of a group show that we staged here called Eternal Youth, and he made 2 incredible paintings for that. And then quickly after invited him to do a Chicago Works exhibition here. And for this evening in progress, I asked Paul to really dig in deep and to think about what are some of the inspirations and things that have moved him and shaped him as an artist. It's one of the things that I'm most excited about is the lives of artists, but also how they come to be those artists. So I'm going to hand over to Paul in a second and ask him to kind of take us through this journey, and I might interject with some questions, and of course there'll be room for you to talk to. So over to you, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming. This is so nice. So yeah, like Omar said, I want to start off by showing you some things that have been sort of like in the background of my mind or influenced me either recently or when I was a kid. And the first is this poem that I found on Twitter maybe a week ago. But I was like, this is the best poem I've ever read. Because it's so simple. It's written by this 6-year-old kid. I guess he lives in DC for some sort of, first grader anthology. But it works on so many levels. On the personal level, maybe it's talking about the literal, maybe it's talking about some kind of like social justice things. It works on all these levels. But as you read it, you just can't help but be excited. So it's this sort of notion of absolute simplicity and contagious excitement. So kind of keep this in mind as I talk, because this is sort of the ultimate goal of mine, is to keep things as simple as they can and sort of keep in touch with this childlike sense of wonder or naivete, but also find in that wonder ways to kind of detonate it, if that makes sense.
Do you want to read it out for us?
Yeah, okay.
For anyone who can't see it.
So this is called The Tiger by Niall, age 6. The tiger. He destroyed his cage. Yes. Yes! The tiger is out. So I love that. And so sort of keeping with this theme of childlike wonder, the next thing I want to show you is this. I'll just play it for you.
neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Well, maybe if I press this button. This is a cassette player with a little cassette in here, and there's nothing written on it, so we'll just have to play it to see what it is. Do you ever imagine things? Are they scary things? Are they scary things? Do you ever imagine things? Things you'd like to have? Did you ever see a cat's eyes in the dark and wonder what they were? Did you ever pretend about things like that before? Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. It's good to be curious about many things. You can think about things and make believe. All you have to do is think and they'll grow.
So it's really cheesy. I know that. But
I think it's great.
I think it's really great because, first of all, he starts off by calling you neighbor, which is like immediately setting the stage of total inclusivity. He's not judging you, no matter who you are, watching wherever you are. You're part of his sort of like neighborly tribe. And I think that's kind of radical in a way. And the other thing is, what I like about this video is it's him sort of talking about imagination as this kind of like elemental building block, an elemental like option or tool for change. And he's talking about how it can be scary, how it can make things grow. He's comparing imagination to a garden, and that's another sort of theme in my work is imagination, this sort of like primal goo of creation, and kind of trying to enact that in the viewer as well. And so then I want to show some pieces that I grew up seeing as a kid, as a teenager here in Chicago. And the first one's this Kiki Smith piece, which is a terrifying, prone, waxen figure. But I remember when I first saw this piece, I was like, how is this art? Why would anybody want to look at this? But that's why it's amazing. It really stuck with me as a kid. Later on, I actually had Kiki Smith as a teacher, and she was surprisingly super nice and like very spacey and super generous. But
She didn't talk about dead things that looked weird or
no,
anything,
I mean,
so.
she was into sort of dreamy stuff and like flowers and like antlers and just do whatever you want. So like it makes sense that some of that dreamy side can go in this direction. But I just remember being maybe like, 9 years old, or I guess it must have been 10 years old, being like, what is this? And it's called Blood Pool. It sounds like a slasher movie, And the next one's this piece by Ava Hess, and it's like, again, I'm like, what? I was like, what is this? Like, why would you want to look at this? And I sort of, on some level, recognized it was meant to be like a painting, but it was like sort of like this Beetlejuiced mutant painting, obviously very violent, entering your space, and I just hated it. And I hated the last piece too. I just like hated it so much. I'm like, why is this art? I hate this so much. I just want like a real painting. I'm a little kid painter. I like painting. Why are you doing this? But now when I go back to the museum, I'm like, this is the best.
And we just went back to see it together on Sunday.
Yeah. And like, I wish I had, you have to sort of, it's big is what I'm trying to say.
I never saw Beetlejuice in it before, but okay.
Yeah, because remember when she's making all those sculptures that are kind of like these sort of like surrealist-y sculptures, and they come alive because the house is haunted. And so this painting is sort of like, the wire support is like coming alive to strangle the viewer, and sort of like, and it also seems to me to talking about the history of violence and like this male-dominated world of painting and like revenge in a way. And the paint, like the support around is kind of like bandaged up like some kind of Frankenstein or something. So I don't know. I think I was right to be scared by it, but I think it's really cool.
I like how you're blurring your pop cultural references with your art historical references.
Well, because I mean, in a way, I think art is entertainment for a lot of people. And I think it's useful to think about it in those terms.
Let's keep going.
Here's this polka painting, which again I thought was terrifying. I didn't really understand the historical references, but it's like this huge watchtower. Even if these geese in the bottom, I was like, this is spooky. This is too weird. I don't like this. Again, now it's one of my favorite paintings there.
So fear seemed to drive you a lot.
Yeah, those are the ones that really stuck with me, the ones that scared me. This one, this Franz Klein, I just thought it was cool. I no longer think it's cool, but you'll see why it sort of has like influenced my work a lot. This sort of Japanese calligraphy influence abac stuff. There's one outside, very similar.
There's one over there, but you actually like Franz Klein.
I don't know. Like I think I think in the 50s I've been like, yeah, he's cool, but now I think he's kind of I don't know.
But you can, it's like you can have influences that you can still feel ambivalent about, right? Like
Yeah,
you don't
that's
have to like
definitely
them
what
as
he
artists.
is. Like I'm not proud that he's an influence, but he is. That's a fact.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah,
Just letting you know.
that's fine. And then this Picabia painting, which I always loved as a kid too. And I actually only recently realized that the story behind this painting was he was on some transatlantic voyage going to the Armory Show in New York in 1912. And there was this priest, this Dominican priest, who kept watching this Polish dancer do her dances. And so this painting is kind of about, you know, the clashing together of the spiritual and the body and like desire and temptation. And now, like, if you see it in the painting, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like luscious and it's like waving back and forth like this boat. And but what you'll see as I get to my work is that this sort of that clashing of like the spiritual and the bodily is a theme in my work as well.
Do you know what material that was made out of?
I think it's just oil paint.
Looks super 3D.
But it's just like glossy oil paint. And this Via Selman's piece, which actually I had mostly seen in a book because I had a book of, you know, work from the Art Institute. And what I found out recently when I was doing the slideshow is that a guard in Philadelphia when I was on loan took a key and slashed through it because he hated it so much. So, I don't know. Somebody hates it. But
See, that I love.
yeah, it's beautiful. So obviously it's like a night sky, and I always wonder, how did they make that? But this kind of like field of dots is something that obviously got deep in my work, as you'll see. And then I think this is this like this Gober piece, which again I thought was terrifying. It's got this sort of like hole running through it that seemed just so violent and terrifying. And it is.
And I feel like that has a real link to the flower paintings, actually.
Exactly.
And when we're going to see.
Yeah. And then, so this was my first show in LA called Young and Full of Cum. And I was like, I work in the show, and I knew that sort of vibe of the show was me kind of like earthy, sultry, sweaty, stinky. And then I was listening to some song, and the phrase came out. I was like, that would be a good title for a show. Like that's catchy, you know? And I remember my dealer was like, I don't know if we should do that, Paul. That's not a good idea. And I was like, no, we have to do it. I'm glad we did it. And so,
I'm glad you did it too.
Yeah,
even though it's been used before.
yeah, but that's also why it's kind of fun. It's like, again, it's like this like pop culture reference. It's kind of like cheeky and fun. So here's a view of the show. This is a night gallery. It started off as a nighttime only gallery that was open from 10 until 2 in the morning. And all the walls were painted black. So this show, keep in mind, was sort of viewed at like a nighttime, not only environment, but like mindset. And so what we see here is this chair that I had built that was designed to take the weight off of the viewer. So you sort of like lean into this leather pad kind of, and you sort of like lean at an angle and you can just sort of relax. And the idea was just sort of give the viewer relief. That's it. And like unbeknownst to me, apparently it had a lot of formal similarities, like these sort of sex slings. And I was like, oh, I guess. Like, I didn't know about these.
So that came after you made that piece?
Yeah, I didn't know about this device, actually.
You don't use that every day?
Yeah, so, but what's interesting is this device also is about like letting go of control, obviously. And so you're sort of at the whim of like whoever you're with. But like the chair that I made, you get to like let go of your control and just like give in to gravity and take it off of your body. So that's a fun parallel. And here's like one of the centerpiece paintings, this sort of transparent stained glassy net thing. And
so how did you get to this kind of style?
You know, I don't know. I just had like, I'd always loved Polka and his resin pieces. I'd always wanted to make one of my own. You know, what actually happened was I heard about somebody making like resin net pieces, and I was like, but I had wanted to do that. Like I had that idea already. And so I was so mad that I like went out and made one. And I love this idea of like transparent things, of this sort of like this like liminal border space, this like line, this like surface that you can sort of pass through. And so like this has a lot of that. It has like the net, it has the stained glass, it has the shells that live like below that liminal space. And so this one's called Truffle BO. And you can kind of,
What's the truffle bit?
it's just like smellness, you know, like that,
Ah.
like sort of like amber color seemed very like truffle BO-y to me.
And those are seashells on there.
Yeah. And so these are all shells that I collected in Malibu.
So you were living in LA at that point, because I guess
Yeah.
we didn't give a biographical note. So you were born in Chicago in the suburbs, and then when did you move? You moved to New York for school, right?
Yeah, for college. I went to New York in 2000, and I was there for about 10 years. After grad school, I was like, I've got to get out of here. Like, I've been at this party too long. And so I moved to LA, helped my friend Davida start Night Gallery. And then that was in 2009, like end of like late 2009. And then this show came up about a year later.
And then the lure of Chicago and its beautiful winters just. He's serious. He loves snow, this guy.
I love all the seasons.
Yeah, he loves. So you moved back here in 2014, 15?
Yeah, end of 14.
End of 14.
Yeah.
Just in case I want to know.
So here's the same piece from a different angle. And the idea, and this piece is sort of situated on the ground, so it becomes like a door, it becomes like a fellow figure in the space. And then shortly after, I was still in this like transparent idea that made these, I started making these cowboys. So this is the first cowboy, Bandit, because the crossbar kind of becomes like a mask across his eyes. But yeah, I just like wanted to make like paintings that you could see through, you know, because I just felt like it's more how like reality operates. Nothing is like as firm as we think it is.
And were you also thinking about issues of gender and sexuality or iconography around gender and sexuality with these or not?
I think with these, there was a little bit of like the cowboy as this like classic American figure, like pinup figure in a way. Like there's a lot of like repressed sexuality of this like man alone on the range, you know?
Also like the Marlboro Man, maybe, like, you know.
Yeah, like this like classic icon of American masculinity, sure. But I also was like thinking about them as like these sort of like sensitive creatures, these sort of like Zen monks of the prairie, like by themselves with the stars and their thoughts and kind of like cut off from society. So I like the portraits on that level too. But shortly after that, I started making a series of figurative paintings as my grandmother was dying. And so when I went back to Chicago to visit her, I would make these drawings when I wasn't by her bed. I'd just sort of like draw things around her house or around her property. And so she died. But eventually I made these drawings into paintings. And so this new series is all sort of like with that in mind. And so this is sort of like whole by her house. And again, you can like the shells and like the sort of like markings on the band, you have these sort of like dashes, things sort of like littering the surface, things that you have to sort of like look through. And later on, I kind of put two and two together, like realized that it's a lot like ash, you know, which is very deathly. This is a sort of lamppost outside of her house, has a sort of like dystopian feel to it with the red lighting, the American flag, the ash swirling around. Like this was kind of a dark show. This is like a 2-person show I did in New York at Rachel Uffner. It was all about death, apparently.
But there's also kind of if a kind of cartoon-like quality to something very dark.
Yeah, for sure. Like the drawings were like made as kind of just like simple line drawings, but it even has a kind of like Kippenbergerian and like Disney like animated coming to life quality, very cartoony, which I always kind of I'm not sure why, but I just kind of like it. Maybe it's the thing like the childhood Mr. Rogers thing, but it's a language that everybody can find access to. Here's a sort of Egyptian one. She had a postcard that I found from the Met. But again, very like deathly, you know, artifact in the tomb. These lily pads like above.
That wasn't an homage to me.
I don't know yet.
my Egyptian self.
Yeah. In this kind of like Egyptian faience blue. Here's the chalice. Not the same postcard, obviously, but you get the idea of the influences.
So that was a kind of different. These are different kinds of influences that have penetrated the work. as well.
Yeah, these were all sort of taken directly from my grandmother's home. So she had this postcard that I kind of like copied in my hands, and some were from drawings of like things that I had seen around her house.
So in that sense, the everyday plays an important role as well in terms of what you're thinking about subject-wise.
Yeah, for sure. But also, like, when I was making this body of work, I also wasn't really thinking about, like, death as a subject matter. It's only in retrospect that I see how heavily it's imbued in these images. Here's these sort of Etruscan birds flying through these rings, kind of like Monet-esque background. She had a big Monet poster in her house.
And is that a history of, like, French painting, the Monet era painting? You've talked to me about how it kind of bears a weight on you, and I'm curious, just like, how do you negotiate the entire history? Painting is the most canonical art historical subject or medium, excuse me, but it's also one of the most perhaps under theorized in the academy. Like, so how do you negotiate that whole expanse?
That's a good question. I kind of had a freak out for a while in grad school. I was like, I'm gonna go to grad school. It's gonna be like a party. We're gonna like drink a lot and talk about art and like do interventions. And then everyone expected me to have some kind of critical theory about what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. I do not know what I'm doing. And I really it was a real like mind bleh, because I had so many ideas, and like painting is so rife with stuff to address and stuff to do that I kind of didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed, and only by kind of deciding to move in a more like instinctual way was I able to get through that, because there is such a huge weight to it, and there's so many things that should be addressed or should be corrected, or so many avenues to explore. And I do have a surfeit of ideas, and you'll see in all the shows that I show you, there's too much going on. And this is like the reduced version of that, but there's just too many ideas. So I just kind of try to see what seems most urgent to me at the time.
But another like art historical kind of reference, you know, we've never talked about this, but when you talk about the kind of cartoon-like quality, when you think about the everyday, I just go to Warhol as a figure and think, you know, his relationship to popular culture must have played or had some influence on you, even if he wasn't necessarily painting in this particular way that you've chosen.
Warhol's so great because he's the one who's like, it doesn't matter, like nothing matters. And that's like a huge weight off your shoulder if you're, you know, 26 years old in grad school, like feeling the pressure of like having to make something important, and you're like in so much debt that are like, why am I doing this? Like, this isn't fun anymore. And Warhol, you remember that Warhol's just coming in and be like, it doesn't matter. Like, just like make 30 of them and sell them. Like, it kind of is a nice relief. You know what I mean? And so
are
I think
you
you're
a fast painter then?
Yeah, I'm a fast painter. Well,
like how long does it take you to make like? I mean, you shouldn't tell people this.
I shouldn't say.
You shouldn't
honestly.
say.
It depends on the piece. But
well,
yeah, I'm a
Lenaya
fast painter.
Domboache makes like she makes it takes her a day to make a painting, and she destroys
Who?
them. You know Lenaya Domboache?
Oh, yeah.
There's a painting of hers over there in the second floor gallery, and she makes a painting a day, and she started to destroy them because she was like, I don't want to ruin my market, but also I just don't want everyone to have one. So just letting you know, you can also destroy your paintings if you want, or you can just give them all to me and I'll keep them safe.
Yeah, no, I work really fast. It's also a way for me to work through ideas. I need to like work through them physically, and that helps a lot. So it's good to make them fast.
This was still from around the time of your grandmother's passing.
Yeah, so this is 2012. Here's the sort of influence behind it. Here's the last piece from that show. These are sort of Etruscan tree shape. And then living in LA, I saw this painting at LACMA of this called Jellyfish Like the Moon from the 1700s. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what is this? You know? It's like, it's figurative, it's abstract. It's like this analogy between this living creature and this sort of like cosmic entity, this like sublime object in the sky. It's so old. It also has like a kind of cartoony element to it. It's sort of like this sort of playful, childlike analogy. And so from here, I was like, I've got to like live here for a while. So for my next show in LA, it's called The Sun Can't Compare. That's a song by Larry Heard, who's like a big Chicago house DJ. And it goes like, You are my light, the sun can't compare. You are my beam, the moon can't
You
compare.
can't sing it?
Something like that. I'm not going to sing it. So you have here these sort of like, I'll show you guys. So these 3 big diptychs that show snow falling. And these are made on silk like a Japanese painting, using sumi ink like a Japanese painting. And I liked it that they can kind of be like doors. They can kind of be like windows. They're portals in a way. They're also like set pieces like in a theater. And so you have these 2 burnt chairs in front that suggest some kind of drama, and the chairs become props in this like staged drama. Okay.
And you're also like, in a way, especially with these ones here, really thinking about the dematerialization of painting, I would say.
Yeah, because they're transparent again in a different way than the resin. And so you have like these millions of dots, not literally millions, but these dots are the real like subject matter floating in this kind of painted, constructed ether, and breaking down this like, what is the painting, what is the structure, where does it lie? It's these 2 pieces. And is it snow? Is it stars? Is it bubbles? It's like equating all those things together too. And I came across this statue at the same time. This is like this is a statue of somebody chanting. And so each of those little figures coming out of his mouth is a syllable in this chant, this Buddhist chant to take you to the paradise place. And I was just like, this is so beautiful, you know? Here's these chairs in front of the one that's called Snow Dawn. And you can't see in the color very well, but this is sort of like peach-colored silk with silver leaf dots and a black structure.
Can you tell us why you choose silk as a material often instead of, say, I'm lost, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like it started off with that jellyfish painting. I was like, I need to do this, whatever this is. And I think part of it was that, like you said before, like this weight of the history of painting had become like materially embedded in canvas. And so working in silk was a way to sort of get away from that. Also, obviously, I love the transparency, like sort of like tactile quality. It's actually one of the most like fire resistant and strongest of all natural fibers. It's this like secretly super strong fiber, which I liked conceptually. But just also in person has like sort of like this like sheen to it, you know, it kind of like shines a little bit, and that's really nice. So this one's the nighttime one. And these are all made, like I said, with sumi ink, which is made from burning wood. Here's the lightest one. You can't really see the dots, but in person you can. Here's a blue one, which seems more like bubbles. And then I made this one sort of like night and day. And this obviously felt to me like a yin-yang thing, which is not just like chaos and order, like that swirl in between those two, but it's traditionally thought of as like the masculine and feminine energies. And I like the idea of these paintings also being a swirl of those two, like a constantly renegotiating like weather system instead of a spectrum or something. It's this sort of like swirl that's like constantly changing. And I like that idea a lot.
Are you also thinking about history's abstraction when you made these particular works?
I thought a lot about Ellsworth Kelly, you know, and that actually, that was in the slideshow earlier, that piece at the Art Institute that's sort of like these like multicolored panels and they're kind of like vibrating the colors back and forth. But thinking about his shape panels a lot, just these like, it's a colored object sitting on the wall, and like that's it. And so I like the sort of muteness of that. And so I have these chairs, which were my first kind of like models of universes, like the brooms that are upstairs. But these are chairs from my house that I just burnt with a blowtorch and then glued these shells on. I like the idea of saying, you know, we don't know the real shape of the universe. Like, let's pretend that it's whatever we want it to be. Let's pretend that it's a chair. And so the shells become planets or stars, and the burnt black becomes, you know, the depth of space.
And is the act of violence of burning the chair something special to you?
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's really fun to light a chair on fire, you know? It's really satisfying.
And you put the brooms upstairs on fire too, right?
Yeah.
So we should be aware that you put set things on fire.
Yeah, I
And
come
if
from
you-
a long line of pyromaniacs, actually. My mom's the
Oh.
audience, and she loves fires. That's a fact.
Arsonist.
Yeah. And so I saw this picture online. This is sort of like, I guess is a classic brain buster. But it's like both shadows are true, but neither one shows us the truth. That's my typo. But it's like we don't really know what's true about what we can perceive. And so that's why I'm making these like universe models, because I want to challenge the viewer to be reminded of that they can like create their own image of how things actually work, because we should all be participating in that. Also, there's a sort of like this is an oarfish as a banner, and I don't know how I got the idea to make this thing, but then shortly after I started construction, all these oarfish, which are these deep, deep, deep sea-dwelling fish that no one had seen alive before, started washing up on the coast of California, and I was like, it's not a coincidence. And so I made this, and so this sort of like this like beautiful French metallic silk with sumi ink spot and this fiber optic glowing fin, so like this beautiful red fin, just kind of like hanging there like sentry in the show. And so the show's very much about like this like sea and sky and snow. I'm always picturing like the coast of Alaska, and you're like alone on this like rugged coast, and it's like snowing, and you're like, should I jump in? That's kind of like the vibe of the show.
You sound like you want to be a star of Brokeback Mountain or something. I don't know, like.
But colder, just like ice cold and snow and like deep sea. So here's the fish alive. Someone got a video of this one, I think in the Gulf of Mexico. You can see how cool they are, right?
So wait, they're extinct?
No, they just live like 2,000 miles below the surface.
Oh, so you rarely see them.
Yeah. So that's why I was like this gesture of like pulling this thing up from the depths, you know, and like find the metaphor that you want. It's like the subconscious, pull it up and hang it there, you know?
Can you eat it?
I don't know. I'm sure you could. Why not?
You should try eating it. You should try eating it. I'm sure it's not delicious.
I'm sure it's fine. So here you can see the fin kind of glowing. I was told the ceilings were a lot taller than they were. It was not supposed to hit the floor. I have to say that. And then you can
bad galleries.
It was a mistake. So there's also this sort of mic stand there because we had hired the lesbian and gay teen center in LA. This kid to sort of like sing the song that the show is titled after at the opening, which is really beautiful. And then lastly from the show, I made this sort of ring of glowing shells on the floor. So this is like about 6 feet across, these shells laying on the floor with this glowing liquid filling each one. And this was sort of hidden behind a wall, so you would come across it in this sort of secret zone, kind of like this secret garden of shells. And, you know, thinking about these like magic-y earth art guys like Richard Long, Andy Goldsworthy, both of whom are British. There's a strong like druid, magical.
You love the Brits.
I can't help it.
He has a really funny British accent that he tries to put
I'm not
going
gonna
to
do it now.
Really bad.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it
It's
now.
really bad. Try on.
It's
Go on.
Andy Goldsworthy, pebbles broken and scraped. But I like that it's like not straight minimalism. It's like magical minimalism. You know what I mean? Because you know, like everybody's days are rough enough. Let's like make it fun, you know? So, you know, there's like glowing liquid. It's like burning like different colored fire, like lava, you know? It's like alchemical, like wizard stuff. And it's cool because like you don't know as a viewer what it's made of. It's like, what is that? Is it lit from below? And you get really close. You're like, no, it's like, it's glowing. What is it? It's cool. And so I like, and like it's secretly like the most toxic stuff. And like I had like rashes for 3 weeks afterwards, but it looks like, you know, like magical ectoplasm. You're like, is this like what life is made of? Like, what is this? And again, like I think it's like, I like that sense, like Mr. Rogers, this sort of magical, childlike sense of wonder, and giving that to the viewer. That's the piece on the floor. Glows kind of blue, obviously. And these are these paintings that were hung in a small gallery, these sort of collage shell pieces in various colors. It's kind of like, you know, again, like collecting shells on the beach for your collection, like being casual about it, and like just doodling on the painting and like rubbing sand into it.
Are you a hoarder at all?
No, but I'm a collector, you know? Like, I like the idea of, you know, it's fun to walk the beach and get stuff and glued onto stuff. And then this is after I got to Chicago. I was like, I need to like start painting stuff again. But this is on silk. And it kind of came at a point where I was in transition in my life, so I didn't know what to paint anymore. And I was like, I'll just paint flowers. It's a forever go-to. I'm sure it'll be fine. And so I just started painting these flowers, and I started putting these like weird like chromosome patterns on top. These sort of like floating Matisse leaf-blown chromosomes. And I want to like make it like super washy, super fresh. Keep it fast, keep it luscious. This is big. This is about like 6 feet tall, but like super breezy. That was like important to me for some reason.
And what triggered that transition? It was just that you moved. It was that you wanted to go
Just
back
like
to the elements.
Just like ADD. You know what I mean? I was like, I can't live off of just like painting dots for the rest of my life. I need to like, I'm a kid that like grew up drawing all the time. Like I like to draw stuff. And so I think I need to like itch that impulse a little bit.
So your days as an abstract minimalist artist are over?
We'll see. Never say never. These ones are sort of inspired by acid house posters and like that color palette of yellow, black, and white, and that like crazy smiley face they would always use on their posters. And so putting that in the flowers. This one's called Spectrum, with a little bit of a rainbow there on that one of the petals. Acid. And this one has like this little butterfly with this lightning bolt in the wings. And now, like in making this show, I was like, oh my God, that's like the jellyfish becoming the moon. Only it's like a butterfly becoming a storm. I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like it's all here together, you know?
But obviously you're also thinking, even from the titles, like Forever, Acid, you're thinking about this kind of heightened state of like euphoria that comes from like drug culture, rave culture. I mean, is that meant to be explicit in the work, or is it not?
I think it's pretty explicit. It's like the power trio, like spirituality, drugs, and sex as these like, you know, well-worn avenues towards like leaving your body or towards the sublime. And so I would say that's kind of like the theme of everything that runs through my work in one of those three ways. So yeah, for sure. Other cowboy.
So I fell in love with this one. This was moved me.
This one's really small. It was actually part of a larger painting that kind of got repurposed and restretched as a kind of fragment, but I think this is one of the more like actually intimate, more poignant ones. Excuse me. And some of them like were just sort of like, this is a smaller one, an evening primrose, which is like a Illinois native flower. Chromosomes almost choking it out, which is weird. But these chromosomes are like this state of absolute possibility. Like they haven't like melded together yet. They're not going to make an embryo. It's just like the cosmic goo of possibilities.
It's also about like the dematerialization or deconstruction of the body. As
Yeah.
Like
Into like a million teeny microscopic components, like blowing it out. Or before it comes together. You know what I mean? Like either after or before, like where in that cycle.
So it's like birth or death.
It's between birth and death, I guess.
Okay.
You know? Not to get too new agey. But then I was like, I can't do this anymore. These are too pretty. I'm getting a cavity. I can't do it. And so one day I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to mark it up. I'm going to do it. So this is the first one. And I put this in here because I don't think it's the best painting, but it does sort of call back those Franz Kleins that I loved. I mean, I had a Franz Klein like poster as a kid. Like that's how much I liked. I was like, he's so cool. It's so not bad. Cool. It's embarrassing. But it's just us friends here, so I'll let you know. It's fine. But you can see how it comes in here. Like this is like a sort of like nonsense Japanese character. These kind of stains or burns on the canvas. And I was like, yeah, that feels good. I like that. This is good. And so I started making these. Oh, this is a sort of a comic book still that I came across around the same time. And this is supposed to be like Bacchus. He's saying, welcome to the party at the end of the world. Which is, again, so cheesy. But I like the idea of these flowers juxtaposed these voids and how like this kind of like Bacchus end of the world vibe plays into that. So here you have this one's called Four Suns. and they kind of are like arranged like dominoes or braille, and they're kind of like vibrating around back and forth.
But that's kind of when I got really interested, because I felt they were also like, you know, heroin addicts, you know, holes, like track marks. They were
Or holes in your brain.
holes in your brain, but they were also like, when people talk about depression, they talk about this complete darkness that washes over you. It's like you've taken something of beauty and you've like literally like engulfed it and put it in darkness.
Well, my whole thing is that it's like what I later realized was not that I was like marring these with these darknesses, but I was more exposing the darkness that was like already coexisting. And so I was kind of like, it's like having eyes on both sides of your head with these paintings and like showing you both at once, which is normally impossible, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one of these apples that I picked from near my studio. Obviously a very charged symbolism in the apple of like both fertility and like forbidden fruit.
So you're always thinking of metaphor.
I mean, not on purpose though. This is all kind of like in retrospect. But I do kind of like, as you'll see, like, I do kind of like that it can operate on those levels. I think it's a juicy extra. Here's a detail.
So let's move up a bit more quickly to your current show.
Okay, so
I mean, this is a context for the current show in the sense.
Yeah, so this was after like I wanted to go a little bit lighter, so I made these sort of like huge sky paintings for this show in LA. I was like, I just want to do a show that's like whoosh. And that was like the only like grounds for like the starting point. So I just like made these huge skies, which I thought were like, this is gonna be like the most like upbeat, like fun show, just like skies.
But actually it was quite depressing for you.
People like, you're like, wow, Paul, this show was really sad. And I was like, what? You know, I was kind of like, I guess. Like, and it was people who like really loved my work and like knew me well. So I was like, maybe you're right.
It's just so depressing, the sky.
They thought it was really depressing. I was like, okay. Here's a sort of figure on the sky, this sort of androgynous, post-human angel guy at the bar.
But you wanted it to be euphoric and utopic, but then people read it as sad.
Yeah, like I wanted to be kind of like, you're like breathing in too much oxygen. You know what I mean? So you're kind of like, okay, yeah. Like
Well, that can be really sad.
yeah, I mean, apparently.
Hard for people physically to do.
Yeah, and it's hard in the long run. And so then I also made this piece called "I Am the Sky," which is kind of like this. Like I was kind of like asking the viewer to imagine themselves as the sky, this impossible task to try and imagine. And it was like really small, kind of. I think I have a piece. It's really small, but it's kind of like a dare or an invitation. And I made like a little like buddy. This one's wrapped in like lining, so it becomes like sort of like a wrap, like a ballet dancer. A skull after El Greco.
You skipped a couple of sides of David Rebillard.
Yeah, like I just
Was he influential to you, or is that something that came later for our conversation?
That's something that I saw a little bit later, but there is this tradition of like these kind of like queer text paintings, kind of humble and small. Him and Paul Tech, which is the next one, and they're just these kind of like nice reminders, I guess, in a way. And I think that's actually like a really generous thing. I'm grateful for these artists to have done that. So here's one that's just compassion. Again, like these dots, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then this painting was in a group show, this painting was called Painting of Magic. And the reason I'm showing this is because like this is an important painting to me personally, because it's asking the viewer to imagine that this painting really is a painting of magic. It actually looks like sort of like sequined, transparent material, but I'm like, I want you to pretend. And so it's sort of like a different kind of dare than the Eye in the Sky piece.
Let's jump forward to. So those were in Eternal Youth.
Yeah. This is a show that I did here in Chicago, Bar 4000, with some more of these like glowing shell stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fish that can see upwards, also in the bottom of the deep sea. And then
What was that image we skipped?
This is like a little video of that last show. But this is so then I decided that I wanted to like inverse the black holes, make these sort of like white orb pieces. So this is like a large diptych. Thinking about this like a still from Sleeping Beauty, like the toxic apple. And so I made these sort of like radioactive blue apples for the show here. And I also like started like filling up all the space around the objects, like every single micro globe of space is somehow charged. Like there's no such thing as empty space. And thinking about painters, like American painters like Charles Birchfield, everything's sort of like throbbing with energy. And then you have these sort of like almost violent energy orbs, which are like the ultimate manifestation of that idea, just sort of like floating there, haunting you. Here's the other cowboy again, like alone, drinking his water, kind of like that.
But this one was displayed particularly uniquely in that you actually painted out the back of it white, and then you spotlit it in a very particular way in this kind of sequence, which it's kind of a strange. I guess you have these two vortex paintings, and then you have this figure who's kind of, we're not sure, is he begging, is he receiving some piss, is he someone pissing in his hand? Is that ambiguity intentional, and what about the theatricality of that as well? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so the theatricality is definitely on purpose. I'm one of those kids who grew up like, I was in plays in high school, and so like that kind of formal setup is definitely in my bones. But as far as the cowboy painting, I wanted to become this like vessel, the way the shells in the ground where they sort of like this like frame is holding this, and like both in a physical and conceptual way. It's got these sort of like sparkly orbs, and I want him like, and he's sort of holding this water the way the painting is kind of like holding him, and the painting is transparent the way the water is transparent, and he's kind of like, what is he doing? Like, is he looking for tadpoles? Is he, like you said, like receiving someone's piss? Is he drinking water? It's confusing. And I like that kind of ambiguity.
So like the power structure, like whether he's in control of his own destiny or not, is like something that is pivoted on the viewer's kind of what perception they want to bring to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's a soundtrack that's in this space. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, and so I wrote this poem, and it's read by my 6-year-old nephew. Maybe he's 5, actually. He's almost 6. And paired it with a kind of nature-y soundtrack, a mechanical drone sound, and then also these sort of ambient 90s rave snippets. And he's sort of talking about how he created this world, sort of like this like little kid talking about building something as if he's a god or as if he's an artist, into this sort of like ambiguous, kind of spooky, kind of optimistic soundscape while you're looking at these paintings.
And then what's the blanket?
The black walls?
The blanket.
Oh, the blanket. So the blanket it's a bed. It's a comforter. And so I always like this idea of taking these humble household objects and blowing them into these sort of cosmic sublime things. So like this 10-foot by 10-foot comforter that looks like it belongs in a spaceship, and like this silver that's sort of suggesting these cosmic waves of infinity traveling through space.
And this one you'd mentioned is very much a kind of Disney inspired, this apple painting.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the idea, like these, the cartoon is a language that we all can speak and allows people to sort of enter the conversation without being intimidated. You know what I mean? Like anybody can look at cartoons and be like, oh yeah, it's an apple, cool. And then next to these brooms, which are obviously a continuation of the chairs, a rethinking of the chairs, these sort of subjective models of universes, everyone in their own universe or making their own universe.
And are they brooms because you love cleaning?
I do love cleaning, but they're brooms because the broom is like the most humble object there is. Like I always also like sort of conflate with this idea of, this like Midwest angst, this like cleanliness and work is godliness, and like they become worn by the body. They become like stand-ins and like traces of the body. And so a lot of these brooms are like used by like my extended family or people we know. So they're kind of meaningful in that way too. And there's little shells glued on in case you can't tell. These burnt brooms, and then these paintings. 10,000 years, just asking the viewer to imagine this like spans of time or become the spans of time. Every day is Halloween. Again, just sort of reminding you about the importance of reimagining yourself and your environment every day.
And that's also a song by Ministry?
Yeah, which is sort of about like, kind of like was designed to be a freak anthem. You know, like we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. People look at us weird, but it's who we are. It's a great song. And then these chromosomes again show up, and you can't tell, but in the blackness is like the night sky. And then lastly is this video that I made like the other day. I just made this for Instagram, but I like the idea of Instagram becoming this like very casual place to like make artistic sketches of different kinds, if that makes sense. But I also like the idea that this sort of shows like how the work can become theatrical. That's it.
I don't know. I didn't watch that. I didn't see that.
You hadn't seen that?
I'm really confused. I'm just like so confused right now.
It's just like a weird, like, I just like the idea that you can now like use like YouTube and the internet to like make these weird like collages. And I don't know, I just thought it was kind of like fun, like kind of like high school theater, like these like Disney monks. You've got this sort of like celestial bubble space. It's like morphing through time. It's like cheesy, like early 90s, like trance music. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
But one thing that brings me to, which is my last question before I open up to you guys to ask whatever you would like to say, ask of Paul, is, you know, you obviously are really using the space of social media and the web as a resource for mining thinking, but your practice is, I'm not going to say traditional, but your practice is, you know, as I mentioned before, is weighted by this historical tradition of painting. And like, how are you negotiating those spaces? How do you think about those things? How are those experiences for you, like going between those two spaces?
I just think that like more than half of the images or what we see day to day is from social media. So that's going to be a source of subject matter no matter what. But I'm a painter, so I'm not gonna like paint pictures of my phone or something. You know what I mean? But these kind of images inevitably end up in my paintings. Like this will probably become a series of paintings of some kind. And like this is not like a finished piece and be like, Paul makes these like video collages for Instagram. That's what he does. But like I want to show you guys like this is like one of my ways of sort of like playing around at home or in the studio as sort of like fodder down the line. So I don't know what will happen with this one, but yeah, like the show that I did here, like that a lot comes from stuff that I've seen online, like online research, like looking at old clips of like dance parties and like Disney movies and like witches and stuff. So it's just like a research tool, and it's a place where all of us live half the time.
Do you do that late at night?
Yeah, just like late at night on the couch from like I should be brushing my teeth. You know what I mean?
So you don't brush your teeth at night?
I do.
Okay, good. All right, so who has questions for Paul or anything to say? We have a mic here that's roving. We going up there?
Hi, so I was interested in some of the language you used to talk about your work, like words like fun and euphoria, and talking about art as entertainment. Because we have this sort of long tradition that argues that art should be the opposite of those things, coming from Adorno and Horkheimer, that there should be kind of this like Duchampian shock that happens, and that this is what artists should be trying to provoke in an audience. And you know, Adorno and Horkheimer are old and dead, but I think this is a problem that kind of continues within art and art history. So you think about people like Claire Bishop at CUNY, who's an art historian who has critiques of practices like those of Liam Gillick and Rikutir Venetia that, they kind of produce like these pleasant spaces and people hang out and they like it because they like talking to their friends and eating Thai food. Whereas Bishop is trying to argue that we should be looking more towards artists like Santiago Sierra, others who kind of have more confrontational like practices that are more reminiscent of the historical avant-garde. So I was just be interested in hearing thoughts about that. Is that you kind of addressed it a little bit at the beginning when you were talking about these works you saw as a child that were very impactful for you, but also very kind of frightening, producing precisely this sort of response that these people like Bishop and Werner Horkheimer and company would want. So I'm kind of interested in how you see those sort of like negative influences coming in, or like why you've chosen to go different ways.
I think, to be honest, it's actually a director's like reaction against people like Rick and Liam, because those were my teachers when I was in grad school. And I remember just thinking to myself, no offense to them, they're great people, but I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, we're making this relational aesthetic space. People like come together. I'm like, this is an awning made of stainless steel that hangs in a museum that costs $30 to get into. Like, you're not creating a space at all, even like a propositional or conceptual space. And quite honestly, like, I talked about how in grad school I was like overwhelmed by like the endless possibilities the painting provided. But I was also like actually very angry because a lot of the stuff that we were reading was, like high philosophy of the moment, and like didn't really have a bearing on like the way people actually live their lives. And like I don't believe like that I can make a direct difference like in a political way. Like, I'm gonna make this painting and I'm gonna change Donald Trump's mind. Like, I don't believe in that, but I do believe that there is like a real like fertile ground for opportunity to sort of like remind the general public of things, or like soften them, or like do certain things. Like I actually like really do like the work of like Santiago Sierra and like the Kiki Smith piece that like haunted me. That I think that is a very legitimate way to make work. It's just not my personality, And so like, given that, the question is, what do you want to do? And like here at the museum, a lot of people who come here, they didn't go to grad school. They don't have a PhD. Like, they don't know what relational aesthetics is. You know what I mean? And so I do think a lot about like, what is the viewer, like, how do I be generous to the viewer? And like, that's my job. And also I will say that I think a lot of like the meaning production of the artwork like lies less in me as like singular subjective figure making this object for the market of ideas, and more in this sort of like in between space between like me like as the object and the viewer. So like what happens between like the viewer and the object, like that's what interests me the most. And so that's the space that I like want to occupy. And if I just like, if they have no way in, I think it's a wasted opportunity, And so that's why like a lot of this, the language of like cartoons, or the likability, the material likability of like the yummy silver fabric, as a way to sort of like draw you in, and then like try to open up some space on like a more subconscious level, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Here.
Hi. I was wondering if you could speak to the chromosomes and the like when they began to emerge in the work as sort of figures. I mean, to me, I feel like there's like some thread in the snow pieces you're talking about. There was the one diptych that you were referring to as like a yin yang and like a masculine feminine energy.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, can you talk about the thread from those like snow paintings and flurries of snow to flurries of chromosomes, and kind of these like signifiers for like potential like embodied gender that haven't come to place, kind of like existing as flurries over landscapes, and then standing in like the sky, like inhabiting spaces of like the night, but then like resolved. if you can, yeah, can you like paint that thread a little bit more concretely? Like, when did you become interested in those chromosomes, and like, what are they doing for you, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that like I have a sort of like I'm like naturally drawn to this formal setup of like little teeny floaty things. Like I just like that on some kind of like weird innate level. I just like it. It's like Christmas lights, you know, little bubbles. I just like that stuff. But I also think that like in a way, as a model or as a metaphor, or even like in a more like cosmically literal way, like they're all the same thing. They become like this like these like million points of light just because you see it in so many places, whether it's like the stars, the bubbles, the snow, like the cells, like it's everywhere. And so like I'm like interested in like why is it everywhere, and like let's look at that and like bring it closer. And that's why I sort of like wanted to apply it directly onto these chromosomes and like remind people like that's everywhere too. And it's even like inside the chromosomes, we have like little dots. And like I said before, it's like making a painting of like everybody or a painting of everything. And like within that is inherent this possibility that anything could happen because this painting contains everything, if that makes sense. And like, I like to sort of like cheekily use the chromosomes like XX or XY to say like, there's still within that like a possibility for anything. It is like a swirl. It is like a universe in and of itself. If that makes sense.
Okay, so we've been here an hour and like we're getting tired. So I want the last question, and I want this last question to be amazing. And so the pressure is on you to come up with like this amazing. Okay, Mickey, are you gonna go for it? Okay, let's go for this.
Good luck, Mickey.
So you once told me that Kiki Smith asked you, what gives you the right to paint? So, given this whole conversation here, what answer would you give her now?
It was actually Kara Walker, which makes the question a lot scarier and a lot more complicated. And that was 10 years ago, almost, that she asked me that. And I would just, nothing gives me the right to paint. Her question was, what gives you as a white male artist the right to make paintings, And the answer is nothing, The answer is just that it's like a human thing to do. And so given the privilege and opportunity that you get to do, that they get to do this with, just don't waste it. I think that's my answer, is like nothing, but just don't waste it.
Don't waste it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You're amazing. It's been a wonderful pleasure to talk to you this evening. We recorded this, which means that you can tell your friends that this will be available somewhere at some point to engage with, and people can laugh at our jokes again and again. And thank you to our public programs team for organizing this event. And please, if you haven't seen the show, go upstairs to the third floor and see it. We also recently opened, if you like painting, we also recently opened Howard Dina Pendel's show on the fourth floor, which is a kind of painting. Some of it is kind of painting. And the museum is open till 9 p.m. Good night. Goodbye. Go drink something. Have fun.